All right, cool. Well, hi everybody. It's Dr. Joel Hunter here, and glad to have you aboard for our first Periscope session of Philosophy 135, Introduction to Ethics. Glad you're here, and we have just a few things to go over today. I'm going to try to get this somewhat organized for you, but welcome to the class. It's going to be kind of crazy. It's a reading intensive course, so do be aware of that. And it's going to go by so fast. We're going to have basically 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks in the first book, which I'll get to in a moment. And then about the last week and a half we'll have with applied ethics problems. So looking at some real world things like terrorism, torture, abortion, animal rights, things like that, where we'll apply the knowledge that we're learning together to those kinds of problems. What I want to do with you today is simply get to know you and have a little exchange here of making sure that we can communicate. So I'm by no means a technophile. I have my challenges, but this seemed to work pretty well last semester with my students. So I want to keep trying it again. And here's how we can use this as a way to interact. If you would, one way to interact is if you're kind of getting something, or if you just need to acknowledge something that I say, you can double tap and that'll send out hearts. So that kind of lets me know that people are tuned in and that you're getting it. So let's try that. If you're listening, you're in the class. There we go, got some hearts, good deal. All right, so you're hearing me, my mic's working, so that's always a good sign. Excellent. And then when you have, I should say, questions or you want to make a comment, all you need to do is type it in. And what you can do to help me, if your name is different than your handle, just give me all caps of your name and then write your question or make your comment. So if you could do that, then that'll be an easy way for me to record the comments so that when we go back and look at it later, you'll be able to see it, or I can at least type them, make them available to everybody. All right, questions there so far? Are we good? All right, so that's how I want it to work. Hi, Alexa. Great. Yeah, see, I never would have guessed that. I'm doing this because I don't have my glasses on. Oh, yeah, I could have guessed that because long Alexa. Right. Good. Well, glad you're aboard, and others who are here, appreciate you coming in. And what we'll do is not necessarily make this the regular meeting time. Monday afternoons generally work pretty well for me. All the times that I mentioned work pretty well for me. But it's probably going to be in the afternoons for the first 3 weeks at least. And then the last 2 weeks we'll see. I may need to move it, but so far this is a pretty good time for me. And we'll see if we can find a time where more folks can show up. But I'm glad the 5 of you are here. We'll keep plowing along. Let's see. So about me, I'm again Dr. Hunter, and I put a bunch of stuff about me on the homepage for the site. So if you go to Canvas, you get the intro page, the homepage. There's a little blurb about me with tons of links. If you want to learn more about me, feel free. If you want to connect in any way, that's fine too. That's why all that stuff is there, because I realize some of the limitations of an online course are communication, are getting timely feedback and things like that. So I want to have different avenues available to you to do that. And that's worked really well for me so far. So whatever works for you is fine. I can tell you now from experience working with Canvas, one way that is not particularly efficient is leaving comments on things that I post in Canvas. So like in the announcements, a couple people gave their answers to the Periscope times, the desired Periscope times, by leaving a comment there. That didn't work so well because that doesn't immediately come to me. What I do get is a notification like, oh yeah, by the way, somebody left a comment, but that requires an extra step from me, and I'm lazy. So, I like to get the immediate thing from you. So if you want to send me an email, that works great. If you want to communicate any other way, that's fine too. But I would just say, if you can remember to maybe not use the comment section unless, and here's a big unless I've left comments for you already, like say on a quiz or something else where I've asked you to submit something where I'm already going to give you comments and feedback. If you want to go back and forth there, that's fine, because that's something that I've already gotten into. Okay, so that's all I want to say about how we're going to communicate in the class. So let's then talk about what we're going to do and not hold you up for too long. So the first thing we'll talk about is the syllabus. And then the second thing we're going to talk about are is the text. And then I'm going to go through just briefly things to emphasize or things to pay attention to in the text. So let's talk about syllabus really quickly. I'm going to keep this very brief since I made the copy available to you. And you can download that from Canvas at any time, of course. So there's a long intro and then the required text. So the required texts are the fundamentals of ethics. There's a cover, a picture of the cover by Schaefer-Landau. And the second text, now this is the one that has all of our, basically call it the theory part of our class, which is going to be the first 3.5 weeks. And then the last week and a half is going to be the applied ethics package. I see my light went dim because my background slide is different. Apologize. But this is going to be where all of your moral problems that we're going to be talking about in the second half or second third of the course. So that's the ethical life. Okay, back to regular light. Let's talk then about the syllabus before I get into the key points here. I just want to get off that slide. All right, so those are the texts. And you should be able to, if you don't already have them, you want to get them as soon as possible. The objectives in the course are fairly straightforward, and I just want to mention these briefly so that we're really clear about what we're trying to achieve in the class, as well as what's going to be expected of you. So that's the learning outcomes. So if you have your syllabus, and I have my copy here, or if you can pull it up on Canvas in your PDF reader or whatever you got, we can look at this together, but or if you have to look at it later, that's fine too. So here's the main thing. I can boil down what the course objectives are in a nutshell, which is basically you need to be able to learn how to recognize an argument and how to analyze an argument once you've recognized it, and then how to write an argument on your own, and how to write a good argument on your own. And for that, for the part, especially where you're doing it on your own, there is some knowledge that you're going to need. You're going to need knowledge of what are some of the basic theories and concepts and ideas. That's what we're going to be doing a lot of here at the beginning. What are some of the major figures? We'll be touching on those as we go through. So you need to know those principles and concepts and ideas that have been presented and that philosophers argue about and continue to argue about. And then you need to figure out what your own views are or how you respond to those arguments as you encounter them in your text. As you'll see in chapter 2 especially, there are lots of arguments, and we will you'll want to be able to start to learn how to do the recognition of arguments, which fortunately your author gives you a very easy way to do this, and to be able to analyze those arguments. And I'll talk about what that means in a moment. So then on the learning outcomes, basically what you want to do is demonstrate the knowledge that you're gaining from this text about the principles and ideas and concepts. You want to demonstrate your ability to argue, and you want to demonstrate then also your ability to take theory and apply it to real-world problems. That's sort of the whole point of the course, is to get you to that point. So that's call it engineering for ethics if you want to, but you want to be able to work through difficult, complex ethical problems with good tools, and you got to know what's in your toolkit. And I like that analogy because working with philosophy can seem very intimidating, and it's easy to sort of brush it aside as irrelevant. But if you have the right tools, it's a very powerful thing. Think of a carpenter. You know, a carpenter has to learn the tools before the carpenter can construct, you know, her dining room table or, you know, or her whatever she's making, cabinetry. So with the right tools, you know what they do, you know how they perform, and you know how to use them to execute work. So that's what you're learning here in the first part of this course, is you're learning the toolkit. And then in the last part of the course, you're going to be doing some very basic attempts at using those tools effectively. All right, so that's kind of my analogy, my carpentry analogy, to make it kind of a practical thing as to what we're doing, which in many ways it is. Okay, so that's enough about the objectives and the learning outcomes. And I see a couple more people have been able to chime in, so great, welcome, and glad you're here. We're just working through the syllabus. I'm going to keep on rolling. So the graded assignments is pretty straightforward. There's 5 quizzes. One thing that I'm sort of playing around with, since this is the first winter session I've taught, and I'm not used to the sort of compressed schedule. It's pretty intense, and the reading level, or the reading requirements are already pretty strong for you. But I'm thinking I might offer at least one extra credit assignment where I'll have you dip into the ethical life text. That's the one with the moral problems in it, and start to practice doing some moral arguments, constructing your own moral arguments, and getting you really prepared. The reason for this is twofold. One, it gives you maybe extra points, if you do well in the assignment. 2, it prepares you for the later quizzes, quiz 4 and quiz 5, where you're going to be asked to do moral argumentation. So I think it's best if I give you some practice at that, other than what you're doing in the first part here, where you're actually reading arguments and analyzing them. It's not the same thing. It is sufficient, but it's better if you actually have time and can practice on your own. And so I'm thinking I'm going to do that as an extra credit assignment. I don't want to overburden you if if this is already going to be a lot of work for you, which it's a lot of reading, period. But at the same time, I want to give you an opportunity to succeed really well on those last 2 quizzes that are going to have a component where you're developing short arguments. And they are short arguments, so it's like no more than a paragraph. So don't worry about it being like a paper or anything like that. No papers in the class. I should see hearts when I say no papers in the class, right? Great. Yes, sweet. Very good. Well, that's it as far as the grade assignments. It's the quizzes, and then probably 1 extra credit, maybe 2. But that again has I have a very important reason for doing that. It's not just to help your grade; it is to actually prepare you to do well on the arguments on the quizzes. I've said that 3 times now. I think I can stop. Okay, your grade structure there is pretty obvious. Attendance, it's just a matter of checking into Canvas, responding to the announcements when they come through. Canvas gives instructors a lot of data on what the students are doing on Canvas. So, I know pretty much who's showing up and who's not showing up and who's checking in and responding. So just, keep on top of it, especially given, this compressed schedule that we're on. You want to be on Canvas at least, for our course, at least 3 times a week, making sure that you're up to date with everything. You know how it is. Sometimes emails fly through your inbox and you miss an update, right? That there was an announcement. Oh, so if you just make it a regular habit to check in every other day, then you're not gonna get behind on announcements that way. So I would just encourage you to do show up for the course in that particular way. And then, if we have these sessions and you're available, certainly let's do that as well. Okay, I think other than the very last thing I want to talk about is the schedule. We're about done with the syllabus. So the schedule is on the last page, and I've already mentioned we're talking about the, let me go back. We're going to be doing the fundamentals of ethics for the first 3 weeks, and it actually carries over into the 4th week. And then we do the ethical life in the final 2 weeks. And so that's the structure of your schedule. And it is, again, reading. It's all about the readings. And what I want to do with the rest of our time together, unless you have questions so far about the syllabus, is I want to move on to the actual readings and give you some general points here about how to succeed in the class. Let me think if there was something else about the schedule that I wanted to say. I can't remember. I don't think there is. I think I've covered all that I wanted to say about that. Oh, no, there is one thing. So one additional point about the schedule is I appreciate that this is the week of Christmas and that next week is the week after Christmas and recovery and all of those kinds of things, and the week of the new year, right? So I've tried to schedule your readings for this week and next week that are an appropriate quantity expectation for a winter session course. So your readings for this week and next week are not as onerous, not as intensive. There's not as much of them as there will be in the final 3 weeks. So do bear that in mind, that try to pace this for you so that it's just not a crazy amount of work this week and a crazy amount of work next week. I have kind of a life too, and so I know there's tons of stuff going on around this time of year, and I certainly want to respect that. And hopefully you will find that the reading schedule I've laid out for you is definitely doable, even though, there's just no way around it. It's a lot in a short amount of time. And just looking ahead, I would say week 3 is probably going to be your most challenging week of reading, right dead center of the session. Some pretty tough material you're going to be doing there. So just a heads up, if you buckle down these first 2 weeks and you stay on pace for these first 2 weeks, you'll be in much better shape going into week 3, where you're really going to have to work hard to digest the most difficult material, which I think is in the course. Week 4 is also a fair amount of reading, but it's not as difficult as week 3. So just to look ahead there. See, I even made it like a mountain, a little hill that we're going to climb, to the middle, and then we're going to tail off and come down. Yeah, all right, never mind. So key points then about what we're going to do here, and strategies for you to succeed in the class. Strategy number 1, I've already put up for you in the announcements for the course some links. And the links have to do with a subject called close reading. And if we were having a regular class, we would already have been talking about this like 5 times, because it's so important. Close reading. Close reading is you're reading to understand something. You're reading something that you're expected to have it pay off as something meaningful, something important, something of value to you. It's the opposite of close reading is desultory reading or desultory reading. And desultory reading is reading like you do at the beach, reading that you do for pleasure. It's not that close reading can't be pleasurable or isn't pleasurable. It can be, but it's a sort of a different pleasure gene or something that's going on there. Different pleasure centers in the brain are being fired. So it's not beach reading by any means, because what you do in beach reading is you're reading as sort of a passive, it's like going to a movie. You're reading as a passive, patient, a passive person. You are not reading actively. You're not taking the book. There's a little acting here. So you're not taking the book and shaking it and going, I want to understand you. That's not desultory reading. That's not beach reading. You don't do that. You do that to sort of escape and relax and unwind. This is not unwinding reading. This is reading that's going to require you to wrestle with it. So it's active. It can be exhausting. But what I want to give you are what I've given you, I should say, are tips and suggestions for how to do it successfully, to take some of that pain away. And so if you haven't done it yet, be sure that you follow the links for the close reading series that I've done on my blog. So check that out, and it's got lots of good information on how to take good notes when you're doing close reading, what to do once you've taken those notes, how to digest them, how to analyze what you've gotten, how to use them. Please, 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 please make sure that you equip yourself with those tools so that you are preparing for the quizzes most effectively. And that's what this is all about. This is about you being successful on the quizzes. And to do that, you've really got to have a good grasp of difficult concepts and be able to be able to express them or hear them expressed in different ways. In other words, not sort of a quote directly from the text, but you got to be able to recognize those ideas and concepts even if the wording is slightly different. You can only do that if you've read closely, okay? So I could go on and on about this subject because it's so very important for your success. But the takeaway is, go read those posts, go read the series about how to read closely. I gave you an example at the end of the series is a 3-parter on doing a close reading of a chapter from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which I did actually. I mean, this was something that I used myself when I published an article on this. It was an article on existentialism in Harry Potter. And, I thought, hey, what better way to show how to do this than to show you what I've done. And I give you what my system is for doing close reading and taking notes. So do check that out, okay? Cool beans. Okay, I beat that into the ground. Great. All right, so when you're going through your text now, when you're going through Fundamentals of Ethics and the Ethical Life, pay very close attention to the bolded terms. Your author tells you this at the very, very beginning in the preface, in the laying groundwork, I think it's called. But anytime that there's a bolded term, that is going to be a key concept, and more than likely, it will appear on the quiz. Not always, but more than likely, bolded terms are going to appear some way or form on the quiz. So be sure that you take time to reread, triple read, quadruple read, all those sections that have to do with a bolded term, where those terms are defined or explained, or examples are given. Take your time with those, because you will see them. The other place to get even a better grasp on the bolded terms is in the glossary. So he's got, I think, every single a major bolded term is also in the glossary. And again, this is not necessarily just reiterating what he already said in the chapter, but it'll probably be put slightly differently. So check out the glossary too. So anytime you hit a bolded term, right there is when you hit the pause button and you start looking very, very closely at what's going on with those terms, and you look at the glossary, check it out, make sure that you grasp and understand the bolded terms. Okay, so that's a major component of the reading. The second major component of the reading is going to be arguments. And I'm going to mention this in chapter 2 when we get to that in just a second. But your author does a fantastic job of highlighting arguments. And what he does is he breaks them out in a formal pattern or a formal structure. And so what he'll do is he'll say, hey, here's the argument from false happiness. And so here's a section of explanation of that, like a page and a half. And then what he'll do is he'll break out in numbered points. He'll indent it so it's very clear what he's doing. He'll indent numbered points, like say 3, and each point is a sentence, and the sentence is either a premise or a conclusion. So it's together, it's an argument. So 1, 2, 3, you've got an argument. So anytime you see those, pay strict and close attention to those arguments as well, because those also will be not only things you need to understand just for your own benefit of being able to grasp the material, but also as we move further on and you have to construct arguments of your own. One way to do the analysis of those arguments is you look at each individual term, or each individual sentence. Okay, so let's say sentence 1. Say you look at sentence 1, and what you want to do is ask questions. You want to say, okay, what are some assumptions here that if this premise is true, or if this statement is true, what are some assumptions? What do we have to assume is true in order to support that premise? And then you look at each of the statements in that kind of way. Now, the way an argument works is and the way he has it formally put is all the premises appear as the first statements. So The conclusion then is the last statement. So let's say there are 3 total statements. That means the conclusion is the third, and then it's got 2 premises, 1 and 2. If there are 4 total statements in the argument, then the conclusion is the fourth, and the premises are 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's the way he presents it to you. It's very, very helpful for you to have that. And it's something that you can take some time to look over as you're reading through it. And before he unpacks the arguments for you, you can make a stab at looking at the different premises and seeing how the reasoning flows. One of the important things about understanding arguments is how the statements are connected to each other, and then so how the conclusion follows from the preceding premises. That's the other important part of argumentation, is not just the statements themselves and what they claim, but then how those claims are connected to each other in order to establish the conclusion. All right, so anyway, I may be talking a foreign language to you here, but your author does a great job of breaking this down in the introduction. So do have a look at that. In fact, that's what my next slide was, is look at that section of moral reasoning. That's pages 9 through 15. Look at that very, very carefully. That probably should be read and reread 2 or 3 times at least. There are several questions on your quiz that are coming from this section because I think it's so very important. This is where he explores the connections between truth and philosophical argumentation, and then morality and moral actions, and how we judge, how we come to specific judgments about actions and the good life and things like that. Okay, so moral reasoning, have a close look at that section. This is where he explains what an argument is. He goes into premises and conclusion. He talks about how they're connected to each other. So do be sure to look at that carefully. And then the 3 areas of moral philosophy are value theory, which we're going to start with. That's our first 3-4 chapters. And then value theory, then normative ethics, and then last is metaethics. Now, we will not be doing metaethics in the course, at least explicitly. We won't be looking at any chapters in that section. We'll be doing value theory, and then we're doing normative ethics. So just real quick, the difference between those. Value theory is, what it's after is what is valuable, what is good, what makes them valuable, what makes something good in itself. In other words, not because of what effects might come from it, not because it's useful or things like that, but just on its own, what is good and what is valuable. Okay, so because if we can answer that question, then we have a much clearer idea of what makes a good life. How can I flourish as a human being? I can't answer that question if I really don't know what's good, because I won't know what's good for me, right? So that's what value theory is about. It's exploring theories about what is good, what is valuable in its own right, okay? So that's value theory. Normative ethics is the study of behaviors, of actions. And so what it's trying to figure out is what makes an action good or bad. What makes a behavior good or bad? So it looks at virtues, it looks at theories of virtue and vice. And so that then is the study of how we make judgments about this or that action and deem it to be moral or immoral. Okay? So it is theories of action and behavior. That's normative ethics. Okay? Metaethics has to do with the broader systems of moral theory. It's how you relate the first part, the value part, and the normative ethics, how those two are combined. But that's a separate subject, and we really don't have time to explore that. It's hard too, but it's cool. Okay, so that's the introduction. Those are the kind of key points I want you to get out of the introduction, is the section on the 3 areas of moral philosophy. You will be asked those on the quiz, and then the section on moral reasoning. Now, the entire introduction is important. There's a section there on moral skepticism that's really helpful too, and I've got at least one question from that section too. But I really want you to pay close attention to that moral reasoning section, because the information he gives you about arguments and how you go about evaluating arguments, analyzing arguments, and recognizing them when you're reading them in a paragraph, that's really valuable stuff. Okay. Good, good, good. So then chapter 1 is the first chapter that is looking at value theory, and in particular value theory we're looking at is hedonism. So hedonism is just comes from a Greek word which means pleasure, and it is the view that what is the highest good, or what is good in itself, is happiness. So you'll look at that chapter to explore what your author wants to present to you about that. And the couple key points to be sure that you are clear about, that you don't gloss these over, is know the difference between what is meant by something being intrinsically good or intrinsically valuable versus instrumentally good or instrumentally valuable. It's a very important difference, and the moral skeptic, for example, is going to question whether there are even such things as intrinsic goods or intrinsic values. That is still debated, of course, in philosophy, but to take certain values as good in and of themselves is to be committed to this idea. Well, look, there are things that are intrinsically valuable, and one of the candidates for an intrinsic value is happiness. So have a look at the arguments for that. The other point is the connection between happiness and pleasure. So I mentioned before that hedonism, the name hedonism, comes from the Greek, which means pleasure. And so a lot of hedonists are known for valuing pleasure above all. And so they don't use necessarily the term happiness. All right, so how does hedonism become happiness? How does it become related to happiness? And part of that has to do with how we understand pleasure. So the coarsest pleasures, the most basic pleasures, are obviously the physical pleasures, right? I just had fish and chips. It was delicious. I loved it. It gave me some pleasure to consume fish and chips. But unless I had that example in mind, I probably would have forgotten it already. So there are certain pleasures which are relatively coarse and immediate, and that can satisfy over the short term, but they aren't durable. And so hedonists have argued about, well, what kind of pleasures are the most valuable? Which ones really stick with us? And so what you're going to see in this in this chapter, is you're going to see a discussion of what the different kinds of pleasure are and which ones hedonism, privileges or thinks is advantageous. So not all pleasures are equal, and if we can maximize, if a good life is one that maximizes happiness, then it follows, and that happiness is connected to pleasure, then it follows that we want to figure out which pleasures are most beneficial, can produce the most happiness, right? Okay, that's how the logic works. So that's what this chapter is about, and those are a couple of the key points I want you to make sure that you grapple with. All right, and then last, and we're coming near the end of our first Periscope, is chapter 2. So this is what your author does in this text, and this is one reason I like this text a lot, is the author will present to you sort of the positive case for the theory, and then he will look at the arguments and positions or objections to the positive case. So it's like, here are the advantages, here's the pro case, and then the next chapter is, well, here's the cons, here are the disadvantages of that theory, and does a very nice job of very, very clearly laying out, where the argument is. And by the way, this brings me to a point, and it's related to what you're going to read in the introduction. Just because, let's just take our example here of hedonism, just because you can't give a final knockdown, drag-out argument in support of hedonism, or even for that matter against hedonism, that doesn't mean it's not a substantive position. In fact, that's what philosophy is. This is just me talking now, okay? I think the most interesting and important philosophical problems and questions are the ones that cannot be resolved with final answers, because the consequences of them being true or being false are transcend just getting, a fact right. It's more than just having a fact right if hedonism is true. I mean, it changes everything. It changes, what we should be spending our life doing if it's true. That's why it's so important. So substantive philosophical theses, positions, do not admit of final answers. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And here's the point number 2 to that. That doesn't mean that they can't be known or that they aren't true. It just means it's that harder to figure out what are the best arguments for or best arguments against. Okay, so that's one of the things that keeps philosophy going is you're trying to answer objections to a position, or you're trying to support a position that's already been thought out, and that's why it keeps going. Okay, so that was a side point about the structure of the text, right? So he does the advantages chapter and then he does the disadvantages chapter. Okay, so on the hedonism chapter, disadvantages, he gives 7 arguments or 7 objections to hedonism that have been given over millennia. Hedonism is an old philosophy. So I like the title of the chapter because it's unlike a lot of the other ones that talk about disadvantages. Is happiness all that matters? And that kind of gives you a hint that, okay, so since this is value theory and we're talking about the search for what is intrinsically valuable in and of itself, maybe it isn't happiness. Well, what else could it be, right? That's a good question, and there are answers to that question as well, which we'll see. And so the objections here look at possible problems with hedonism as the view that happiness is intrinsically valuable. And so you've got 7 different objections there. And this is the section, by the way, or the chapter, by the way, I was telling you earlier, that is structured in this way where he highlights the arguments, and breaks them down in these numbered statements. So it's really helpful in this early going to spend some time in chapter 2 to understand, how arguments work, and then how you can analyze individual statements in an argument, and then you can apply what you learned in the introduction in the moral reasoning section to what you're doing in chapter 2. This is where the more you can solidify that early on, the better off you're going to be going forward. So anyway, these are fairly straightforward chapters. These are not difficult chapters, and they're not long either. The disadvantages chapter is longer. This chapter 2 is longer than the first chapter. But yeah, so that's the structure. That's what we got to cover this week, folks. And I hope you enjoy the reading. And what I can do now that I've done all the slides that I've got for you is just hang out here for just a moment. And if you have questions for me or any comments you want to make, you can fire them away, type them in, and I can answer them for you. So I'll just sit here and stare blankly into the screen as you think about a question, if you've got any. I think I've covered everything that I was going to cover. Probably you can get all your shopping done and stuff. You might have some distractions, I understand. Any questions? Okay. Well, great. Thanks for tuning in, folks. I appreciate it. I hope this was helpful, and I'll be doing it again next week, and I'll go through those readings. It will probably be on Monday again, probably in the afternoon. But I'll post an announcement to let you know exactly when that's going to be.